They locked me in a psych ward on my 17th birthday. Not because I was dangerous, not because I was hallucinating or unstable, but because I knew something I wasn't supposed to know. Because I asked the one question no one in my family wanted to answer. My name is Lila Monroe. If you asked my neighbors, they'd describe me as the quiet daughter of the perfect family on Willow Drive. My dad, Dr. Alan Monroe, is a respected trauma surgeon. My mom, Elise, runs a local nonprofit for abused children. My older brother, Jamie, was the golden boy. Varsity soccer, top of his class, always smiling for the photos. We were the family everyone else in town measured themselves against. On the outside, it all looked spotless. But inside, behind locked doors and perfect smiles, the cracks ran deep. I was the crack. Growing up, I always had questions. Why did Mom scream in her sleep? Why did Jamie come home with bruises he couldn't explain? Why did Dad's moods swing like a wrecking ball through the house, shattering peace with a look or a word? Anytime I asked, I was shut down with forced smiles or thinly veiled threats disguised as concern. You imagine too much, sweetheart. You're sensitive. Don't stir the pot. I stopped asking questions out loud, but in my head, they never stopped. And then, 3 weeks before my 17th birthday, I found something I wasn't supposed to. Jamie had been acting strange, withdrawn, twitchy, like he was living inside a pressure cooker. One night while he was out, I went into his room to look for a sketchbook he'd borrowed from me. I wasn't snooping, I swear I wasn't. But in his desk drawer, under a pile of old tests and birthday cards, was a small, beat-up USB drive. No label, just a strip of red tape. My stomach flipped as soon as I touched it. You know that feeling when you cross a line you didn't know was there until too late? I waited until midnight, plugged the USB into my laptop, and found folders named with numbers. Dates, I realized. The most recent one was from last October. I opened it. My screen filled with grainy footage, security camera clips, apparently, from Dad's private clinic. I recognized the hallway, the patient rooms. I even recognized Jamie. One video showed him crying. Another, with a split-second timestamp jump, showed him being dragged into Dad's office. He was bleeding from his nose and shaking. But it was the third video that broke something inside me. It was a girl, around my age. Blonde, limp, her body half covered with a stained sheet. Jamie was there, pacing, hands covered in something dark. My father entered the frame. No panic. Just cold calculation. He barked orders. Jamie kept saying, "I didn't mean to." My father didn't comfort him. He slapped him. Then, they carried the girl's body, dragged it, really, out of frame. I covered my mouth, bile climbing my throat. My skin crawled. I closed the laptop and just sat in the dark. It felt like the room was shrinking around me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat the next morning, but I knew I had to confront them. I waited until Sunday dinner. My mom had made lasagna. Jamie sat across from me, not touching his food. Dad passed around the salad like we were in a sitcom. I cleared my throat. "Who was she?" I asked, my voice louder than I expected. They froze. "Who was the girl you and Jamie moved from the clinic last October?" I turned to my brother. "You said you didn't mean to. What happened to her?" My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. Dad's smile disappeared like someone flipped a switch. "What did you say?" "I saw the footage," I said evenly. "On Jamie's drive. You lied. You both did." My mom dropped her fork. Jamie's eyes filled with tears. "You went through my stuff," he whispered. "Lila, you don't understand." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to make me the villain. I saw what happened. She's dead, isn't she? What did you do with her body?" Then came the slap, not from Jamie, from Dad. Quick, hard, across the face. It knocked me sideways. My cheek stung. Tears sprang to my eyes, but I refused to cry. My mother gasped. "Alan," she said half-heartedly. Dad leaned in close. "You don't know what you saw," he growled. "And you're never going to mention it again. Do you understand me?" I stared back, blinking hard. I understand everything. The rest of the night is a blur. I remember Mom pacing, Jamie sobbing, Dad yelling in the garage. But the next morning I woke up to something even worse. 2 men in white coats, a woman with a clipboard, Mom holding a suitcase. "Lila," she said softly, like she was telling me we were going on vacation. "We think it's time you got help. We've found a place, Briar Ridge. They specialize in adolescent mental health. You'll be safe there. Away from everything." I laughed. I actually laughed. "You're serious? You're committing me?" "Delusional paranoia," one of the doctors said to the other, writing something on his clipboard. "Schizoaffective indicators, possible dissociative traits." "What are you talking about? I'm not sick," I shouted. "They're lying. They're trying to cover something up. There's proof on the USB." Dad walked in holding my laptop. He smashed it on the floor. "There's no USB. There's no proof. Just your sick little fantasy." That's when I screamed. I screamed like I was being murdered. And maybe I was. Maybe not in the literal sense. But in that moment, Lila Monroe, the version of me that believed in justice, in love, in family, died. They restrained me. I kicked, fought, begged. But eventually, they sedated me. The last thing I saw was Jamie standing at the top of the stairs, watching me with red-rimmed eyes. He didn't say a word. They drove me to Briar Ridge Psychiatric Hospital on the morning of my birthday. No candles, no gifts. Just a white room, barred windows, and the sickening knowledge that I'd been erased from my own life. Labeled, discredited, forgotten. The days blurred together. Pills 3 times a day. Group therapy sessions where no one listened. Nurses who treated me like a wild animal. I kept telling them I didn't belong there, that my family had faked it all. But the more I insisted, the more they wrote in their notes. Persistent delusions of familial abuse. Hostile affect. Unreliable narrator of personal history. I wasn't unstable. I was the only one telling the truth. But in a place like Briar Ridge, truth doesn't matter. Only what they write in your file does. For a while, I gave up. I stopped talking. I stopped eating much. I let the days pass like molasses. My hair got greasy. My bones got sharp. I started to believe they might win until I met Dr. Rain Carter. She was new, young, sharp-eyed, not yet hollowed out by the system. One day during individual therapy, she just looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "You don't seem psychotic, Lila." I swallowed hard. "I'm not." She leaned forward. "But why would your parents commit you if you weren't?" I didn't answer. Not right away. But something shifted that day. A crack of light in the darkness. I didn't know it then, but it was the beginning of the end. Not for me, for them. For now, though, I waited. I pretended. I played their game, took their pills, laughed when I was supposed to, nodded when they asked if the voices had stopped. Because I had to get out, because the truth wasn't dead. It was just buried, and I was going to dig it up, even if I had to burn down my whole family to do it. The hardest part of surviving Briar Ridge wasn't the medication or the silence, or even the stares from the other patients. It was pretending that I belonged there. That was the game I had to play. In the beginning, I fought back, screamed, demanded someone listen. But no one ever does when the people who locked you away wear lab coats and last names like Monroe. My file said I was unstable, dangerous, violent. The kind of teenage girl who might kill her family in their sleep, and that's all they needed. But after meeting Dr. Rain Carter, I began to see a thread, a thin and fragile thread that could pull the truth back into the light. If I was smart, if I was patient, and if I didn't let the madness they tried to force-feed me swallow me, whole. Dr. Carter was unlike the others. She didn't flinch when I looked her in the eye, didn't check her watch every 5 minutes like she was just counting down to her next promotion. She listened, and not the fake kind of listening you get in places like this. She asked questions that told me she suspected the truth but needed more to believe it fully. So I started talking slowly. First little things, like how my parents used to punish me for asking too many questions. Then the night I found the USB. Then the girl, her lifeless body, the blood on Jamie's hands, the cold, calculated way My father ordered it all to disappear. I expected her to stop me, maybe even report me. Instead, she nodded and said, "There's a lot that doesn't add up in your file." That sentence alone was more kindness than I'd received from an adult in months. The following weeks, I played the role of a model patient, took every pill, hid most of them under my tongue and spat them out later, participated in group therapy, nodded and smiled when asked about progress, and responded to staff with the rehearsed politeness of someone cured. And all the while, I worked with Dr. Carter behind closed doors, weaving together a timeline, every scrap of memory, every inconsistent story my family told. She pulled old security logs, consulted her psychiatrist, friends outside the hospital. Together, we built a case, a real one. But escaping wasn't going to be as simple as running through an exit door. My parents had made sure of that. My diagnosis was sealed by multiple professionals, thanks to my father's friends in the medical board. My records were scrubbed clean of any sign that I'd ever been anything but deeply disturbed. It was airtight. Until I remembered Sasha. Sasha was my roommate during my first 2 months in Briar Ridge. She was sharp, paranoid, sure, but brilliant underneath all the scars. She had been in and out of institutions since she was 12. She taught me how to fake out the nurses, how to reset the cameras in our hallway for 20 minutes at a time, and how to hide contraband in the broken ceiling tile above the closet. But the most important thing about Sasha, she was a hacker. Not the keyboard-mashing type you see in movies. She was precise, silent, dangerous in the best way. I hadn't seen her in weeks. She'd been moved to isolation after punching an orderly, but I begged Dr. Carter to transfer her back to the general population. "You're playing with fire," she warned. "Good," I said. "Let it burn." We waited a week. Then Sasha was back, slouched into the corner of the rec room, muttering about the cameras being spies from NASA. But when we were alone, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You got out in mind?" I nodded. "I need access to the outside, and I need to leak something, a video." She smirked. "You're finally ready to ruin someone." "Not someone," I said. "Everyone." Sasha got to work. She used the hospital's Wi-Fi to mask her IP address and logged into a series of tunnels I didn't even pretend to understand. She recovered what was left of the USB files. The originals were gone, destroyed when Dad crushed my laptop, but I'd emailed backup clips to myself the night I found them, hidden in a draft folder in an obscure dummy email. Sasha decrypted the files, cleaned up the audio, and even pulled metadata to prove it came from my dad's clinic. "This is murder evidence," she said in awe. "You could take them all down with this." "That's the idea," I replied. But I didn't just want revenge. I wanted exposure. I wanted the world to see who the Monroes really were. So we started editing. Sasha had software. I had the truth. We created a video documentary, raw, unfiltered, and terrifying. I narrated it like a confession. The footage of Jamie's panic, the bloodied girl, Dad's cold-blooded orders, it was all in there. My voice wove through the images explaining what happened, how they turned on me, fabricated my illness, and locked me away to keep their hands clean. Dr. Carter smuggled in a burner phone, and Sasha uploaded the video to 3 different platforms, under the title, The Monroe Family Delusion. We hit publish, and then we waited. At first, nothing. Hours passed. I sat in the corner of the rec room, heart thundering. Then the views began to climb. Hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands. The comment section exploded. People demanded answers. Internet sleuths found connections between my dad's clinic and other missing girls. A local reporter picked up the story. And just like that, the house of cards began to collapse. Within 24 hours, the video had over 2 million views. News stations were calling Briar Ridge. Reporters showed up at my family's front gate. My mom sobbed on national television, calling me disturbed and manipulated by dangerous influences. But the world had seen the footage. They weren't buying it anymore. My father was placed under investigation. The medical board suspended his license pending inquiry. Detectives reopened the case from the footage. The girl's body, presumed dumped and lost, was found buried in a shallow grave 3 miles from the clinic, wrapped in hospital linens. The DNA matched a missing teen named Clara Grant, reported months ago. Jamie was brought in for questioning. He cracked. Of course he did. He always was the weakest link. He confessed that he and Clara had been dating secretly. One night, things got heated. An argument turned physical. He shoved her. She fell, hit her head, and never woke up. My father, ever the savior, cleaned up the mess, told Jamie they'd handle it, made it disappear. I was never supposed to see that USB. When I did, they rewrote the narrative and turned me into a convenient lie. Within days, I was no longer a patient. I was a whistleblower. Briar Ridge administrators scrambled to issue statements. My diagnosis was challenged. Dr. Carter, who risked everything for me, presented the inconsistencies, the lack of proper psychological evaluations, the coercion. A judge reviewed my case. I was released into her custody pending full exoneration. And just like that, I walked out the front doors of Briar Ridge. No shackles, no sedatives, just freedom and fire in my veins. The media frenzy was unbearable at first. Paparazzi outside, every door. Online trolls who didn't believe me, but the support outweighed the hate. Thousands of girls messaged me saying they'd been gaslit, silenced, disbelieved by their own families. I wasn't alone anymore. And best of all, I had my voice back. I did interviews, podcasts, spoke at rallies, told my story without flinching. Every time I said the words, my family faked my mental illness to cover up a murder. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself they tried to bury. But it wasn't about fame. It was about justice. And justice came for every last one of them. My father was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to cover up manslaughter. He pled not guilty but was denied bail. My mother was found complicit in the cover-up. Turns out she'd helped forge documents about my mental health, faked therapist signatures, and even threatened a social worker who'd asked too many questions. She cried through the trial, but the jury didn't flinch. Jamie received a reduced sentence for cooperating, but the truth was out, and he'd never lived down what he'd done. His college offers vanished. His reputation was obliterated. He tried to apologize once, sent me a letter from jail. I burned it. I owed him nothing. They tried to break me, tried to erase me. But in the end, all they did was sharpen me. The story went viral. I was invited to speak before Congress about wrongful psychiatric institutionalization. Advocates rallied to pass what they called Lila's Law, a bill ensuring teenagers can appeal psychiatric holds if medical manipulation is suspected. That was the moment it all came full circle. From the White Room in Briar Ridge to standing on Capitol Hill, testifying with shaking hands and steel in my voice. I was no longer a patient. I was a storm, and through it all, I never forgot Clara Grant, the girl who died, whose name no one remembered until I screamed it. I had a bench made for her. Simple, beautiful. It sits in the park near Briar Ridge, engraved with her name and mine beneath the words, "Truth will not stay buried." Every time I pass it, I think of that night, my birthday, the locked doors, the betrayal. I think of how close they came to winning, and how close I came to letting them, but I didn't. I survived. I told the world. I made them listen, because the monsters weren't in my head. They were in my house. The world moved on faster than I expected. The headlines faded. The hashtags got replaced by new ones. The public outrage that once roared like fire dulled into a flicker of curiosity, then silence. But my life, my wreckage, my scars, my name, still burned. For a while, I didn't know what to do with that. I'd survived, yes, but surviving wasn't the same as healing. Every morning, I woke up with the phantom scent of hospital disinfectant in my nose, the echo of a lock turning behind me, the cold weight of people who looked me in the eye and called me insane when all I ever did was try to tell the truth. People congratulated me like I'd won something. "You're so strong, Lila. You're an inspiration." But they didn't see the bruises beneath my skin, the ones no one ever took pictures of. No one saw how I still checked behind every mirror, how I flinched when I heard doors lock. I was free, but I wasn't whole. Not yet. For weeks after the trial, I drifted. Dr. Carter let me stay with her. Her apartment was small, but warm. Safe. She made me tea every morning and never asked me to talk when I didn't want to. I'd sit in her kitchen with the sun creeping in through the curtains and think about how strange it was that a stranger fought for me more than anyone with my last name ever had. At night, I replayed everything in my mind. The USB, the look on Jamie's face, the way my mother gripped my hand in court like she hadn't just tried to erase my existence. And even then, a part of me still searched for a reason, an excuse, something to make it hurt less. But there wasn't one. They didn't do it because they were desperate. They did it because they could, because power was a game to them, and I was just a piece they were willing to sacrifice to stay clean. I could have disappeared then, changed my name, moved somewhere no one knew me, and started over. But something kept me here. Something louder than fear, louder than trauma. A purpose. Because if it happened to me, Lila Monroe, from the perfect suburban house with a doctor father and a stay-at-home mother, it could happen to anyone. And most girls wouldn't have a Dr. Carter. Most wouldn't have a hacker roommate named Sasha or a USB that refused to stay buried. Most wouldn't get out. That's what kept me awake at night. So I stopped hiding. I spoke. Loudly. I did every interview I was offered, not for attention, but to make noise. I joined advocacy groups, volunteered at shelters, met with girls who had been institutionalized against their will. One girl, 16, told me she was sent away for being too emotional after reporting her uncle for abuse. Another had her diagnosis forged after she caught her brother dealing drugs. Our stories were different, but the betrayal was the same. Families choosing silence over justice, lies over love, monsters dressed in normal. That's what they all had in common. And I decided I would make it my mission to rip their masks off, one by one. But justice has a price. And mine came due when I walked into a bookstore one rainy afternoon and saw my face on the cover of a tabloid. The Girl Who Cried Monster. Is Lila Monroe telling the whole truth? My heart dropped. Inside was a smear piece full of interviews from distant relatives who barely knew me. She always had a flair for drama. She was never like the other kids. It's possible she imagined things. They'd planted seeds meant to discredit me, to put the doubt back in the public's mind. My Aunt Rachel, who I hadn't spoken to in 4 years, claimed she remembered me acting out at age 10. The article dredged up my therapy. Records hinted that Dr. Carter was emotionally involved and not objective. It was cruel, vicious, and it worked. The internet turned again. People asked if I'd faked everything, if I'd edited the video, if Clara even existed. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I did something better. I called a lawyer, and I sued them. The lawsuit made headlines, but it wasn't about attention. It was about setting a boundary. I wasn't going to let them rewrite my story again. They had taken my childhood, my family, my trust. They weren't going to take my voice. The case dragged on for months. During that time, I leaned heavily on Sasha, who'd gotten out of Briar Ridge after exposing how they falsified patient files. She lived in a shoebox apartment now, but she was thriving, taking computer science classes online and helping me track any digital harassment or misinformation campaigns launched against me. Together, we created a small organization, Girls Who Woke Up, a nonprofit to support and legally represent young women gaslit or institutionalized by their families. It started as a blog, then a podcast, then a full-blown legal aid service. And for once, the fire inside me wasn't burning me up. It was lighting the way for others. Still, the ghosts remained. I couldn't stop thinking about Clara. I'd dream of her sometimes. Silent, pale, reaching out to me. I needed to face it. So I went to the forest where they found her. Alone. I stood in the spot where her body was buried. The wind was cold. The trees too quiet. I whispered her name. Apologized. Promised her I would never let the world forget her again. I left a single white lily at the base of a tree. And when I turned to go, it felt like something lifted. A breath. A blessing. Or maybe just the final piece of my soul returning home. Months later, I won the lawsuit. The tabloid paid damages. Aunt Rachel issued a public apology. And my record, the false psychiatric file, was officially expunged. I was free. For real. this time. Not just from the hospital, but from the story they'd tried to write for me. My book deal came shortly after. Not a tell-all, a manifesto. Titled, Monsters in the Mirror: How Families Destroy the Daughters They Claim to Love. It hit bestseller lists, not because I'm a great writer, but because too many people had lived it. The same betrayal, the same silence. And finally, someone was saying it out loud. I visited my parents once. Just once. They were both in prison by then. Minimum security, of course. Justice isn't perfect. My mother looked older, smaller. She didn't cry. Neither did I. She said, "You destroyed us, Lila." I looked her in the eye and said, "No, you destroyed me. I just told the truth." My father didn't speak. Just stared, as if trying to calculate how I'd gotten so far without him. I stood up before the guards could call time and walked out. I never looked back. And now? I live in the city. I have a cat named Riot and a room filled with plants. I speak at schools, at conferences, anywhere someone will listen. I still go to therapy, still have nightmares. But I've learned that survival isn't just about making it out alive. It's about choosing every day to stay human, to stay you, even when they try to turn you into something else, especially then. And most of all, I learned this. Monsters aren't always strangers. Sometimes they're the ones who tuck you in at night. But if you keep breathing, keep fighting, one day, you get to be the one who turns on the light. Because my name is Lila Monroe, and I wasn't crazy. I was the only one telling the truth.